Hello, hackers. In this episode of Leadership Hacks, I had the pleasure of having a conversation with Suraiya Comunello, who is a Chief Marketing Officer at Nido Living. It was great to speak to somebody who had such a calm but assured demeanor, but also speaking to a brave woman who was the purpose-built student accommodation woman of the year. On what's important to her and to the legacy she wants to leave for her two daughters, who she doesn't want to see have the same struggles in the workplace. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to another edition of Leadership Hacks. And on the podcast today, I am excited to have Suraiya Comunello, who is a Chief Marketing Officer at Nido Living. Suraiya, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for agreeing to come on it. With Leadership Hacks, one of the things that I try to do, or the aim of what we're trying to do here, is to have compelling and interesting conversations with people who have had a degree of success within their careers. For me, I always remember being in a position where I was in a fairly junior position and I didn't quite have somebody I could look up to as a mentor. The world we live in now, there is just so much content that is online. And I'm hoping that by us having a conversation, understanding what your journey has been like through to today, it may help the younger version of you and I who are on their own journeys, who may be struggling, who may be trying to figure out, well, what's next and how am I going to become successful? And so, with that said, let's get into the conversation because you are a chief marketing officer. Before I go anywhere else with that, what does that even mean?
Well, first of all, very flattered to be called successful. I'm going to do my best to live up to that. Chief Marketing Officer. So for Nido, that means that I am in charge of ensuring that we meet our occupancy targets across the portfolio. So we need to drive as many leads as possible and interest in the business so we can fill our beds. But a big part, and probably the part I enjoy most, is being in charge of the brand, our values, and how that translates into the experience that our residents have, not only the residents, but also our employees. So I think being able to lead on brand and experience is probably the biggest parts of the job that I do. I also look after all of the PR and communications, and that's also really interesting.
You touch on PR there. PR is huge at times. I think PR is huge when things go wrong too. What's that element like when, because I think with all businesses, you're always going to come into some kind of controversy. What's your process in dealing with something when something hasn't quite gone to plan and there's a possibility of it being portrayed in a way that Nido wouldn't want?
I tend to be quite calm about it. When you've been in the sector as long as I have and seen what I've seen, my first question is always, are people safe? Is everything okay on a human level? As long as that's ticked, then yes, everything is reputational. And we know that that can have huge impact on businesses. But ultimately, it's about kind of ensuring that we know what all the facts are, ensuring that we haven't intentionally or unintentionally done anything which is going to worsen the situation or has contributed to the situation. And then in just ensuring we have a really clear plan on how to make sure that whatever has happened is rectified, dealt with, communicated clearly. But my focus is actually never on the media first. It's always our internal stakeholders. So the first communication will always be to the people that are living in our buildings and to our teams. And then media is just a byproduct of obviously how things go these days. Things spread so quickly.
I love that answer, Soraya, in that because that really is a people first, people centric response, isn't it? And I can see how you were voted Woman of the Year in 2023 within purpose-built student accommodation because you have such a calm demeanor about yourself. I'd want you handling my PR if I was ever in a bit of a pickle. What was the first leadership moment that you had where you thought, actually, I think I could do this. I could become a leader. I could become a head of.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. And I was reflecting a little bit on my career before the podcast. And actually, it was when I was working in a university. So I started my career working in a university. And I did a couple of roles there and I was promoted quite quickly. And I was offered a role as marketing manager of the School of Economics and Finance. And it was a totally new role. It was all a little bit, many of the people in the school, the admin staff, particularly the professors working in the school, they really didn't understand the role, why I was there, what I was even going to do. It was actually the head of the school that knew that we could drive value via marketing. So I was told that I wouldn't last more than a few months in that job, which
Right.
obviously spurred me. But what I recognized and what I learned from that was that I had to convince incredibly intelligent economics and finance professors the value of marketing, my individual value, and how we could collaborate so we could all reach our kind of common goal of recruiting more students for the school. As you can imagine, I think I was 24 or something at the time. So it was pretty intimidating to
Mm,
have to do that. So I was 100% in the deep end. I didn't really know that what I was proposing was going to lead to success. I mean, again, I was the first person doing this in that kind of position. So I was suggesting totally new things. I knew I had to adapt to their style quite early on. So the way I articulated my strategy and outcomes obviously was all related to the numbers
yeah.
because I was talking to finance professors, but I did really focus on the relationship building. And I think that made a huge difference. And when I won them round, we actually collaborated so well together. And when we started seeing the results, I did have a moment in that after that first year where I was like, I did it. It was hard, but it was then I think that I knew I could do more.
I mean, I love that story. It resonates with me in my career too. I had a similar experience where I went into a university to start this recruitment agency and came across, universities are very academic environments and came across all sorts of barriers and having to learn to speak somebody else's language and to act in a different way to try and get what you know to be right across. Were you fearless in those early days? Was it drive? What made you try to break down those barriers? Because as a 24-year-old in that type of environment, it can be very daunting. And so I'm just curious as to what were the key drivers at that moment in
I
time.
wouldn't have thought it was being fearless. I remember sometimes just, when you have that feeling in the pit of your stomach, like, okay, I'm going to have another difficult conversation. I mean, I didn't even know what stakeholder management was at that
Yeah.
point, but that's exactly what I was doing. I think it was a drive to prove to myself that I could do something.
Hmm.
And by doing that, also to proving to others, people that thought, okay, how could this young girl go and do that kind of job? Yeah, I suppose there was a little bit of that, just trying to show that I could do it,
Yeah.
actually.
And you touched on it. You said that somebody said to you that you won't last more than 3 months in that role. And that's clearly stuck with you
Yeah, it did.
through that time. It's funny, isn't it, how some of those it can be just small words and sentences said like that can drive us on to and give us the motivation to go and prove somebody wrong. And that's had a positive impact in on your career to date.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was in that moment. I also realized that people won't always be in your corner. I
Mm,
think up to then I had been surrounded by very kind of good managers and leaders. And obviously I was then thrown into an environment where they didn't want me around and they didn't really understand. And it was kind of like, okay, I need to have this to show that I can do it. But I also need to look after myself.
yeah, and to that you did. Look,
Yeah.
you've got many abilities, one of them being multilingual, and you've got a lot of international experience. I know you oversee Nido for Europe. What has your cultural background shaped your approach to leadership in the marketing within Europe?
That's a really good question, and I've never been asked it before. It's actually been invaluable, and I mean, there's been many times in my life, probably when I was younger, where I just wanted to be the same as everyone else. But I realized that I'm so grateful for the exposure and the background I have because I've I've just grown up in a different way and I process and think about things in a different way than other people. It's made me hyper aware, I think, of nuances.
Yeah,
So that's like nuance in, of course, language, but also, tone and context. Everyone comes with their own context, which is based on their lived experience and the culture and how they've been raised and how they've grown up. And that kind of drives them and it makes them behave in certain ways. So because I have this exposure through my own background and then through my husband who's also got a mixed background, so my daily kind of basis is
sure.
very mixed. I've just been able to use all of that when I'm managing teams and relating to people, and obviously in PBSA as well, where our audiences are so diverse. It just helps me build more inclusive and relevant strategies, I think, to the communities that we serve today.
You said PBSA. For those who don't know what
Oh,
PBSA
sorry.
is that okay? It is purpose-built student accommodation, which is where you are an absolute expert. And you're absolutely right. Within those communities, so within student accommodation, there are so many international students from all over the world, plus obviously people within country, whether you're in Spain, you're in the UK, Netherlands, and all these other places, where you're trying to create a community where people can live harmoniously. And I know that's something that's very dear to Nido, and something that you really focus on. Coming back to the cultural aspect and your background, I know for me, one of the, I'm of Nigerian descent. I was born in the UK, but my parents are Nigerian, moved over in the late 70s and had us children. And one of the things that was always instilled in us as children was respect. You respect your elders, and I have always, and therefore, it doesn't matter where I am. If you are older than me, immediately I have to get out of a seat. I will. There's just loads of different things that are just ingrained. Career-wise, actually, I struggled with that, and reason being is when I started to manage people older than me. When I first had that experience, honestly, Soraya, it messed with my head. I couldn't get my head around telling somebody what to do or asking somebody to do something who was older than me, and therefore that took a lot of unlearning, learning, and
Yeah.
figuring out. I don't know if you've got any nuances like that from your cultural background where you had a bit of a struggle or had to readjust.
Yeah, it's actually very, very similar to you in that sense. It's definitely been a respect thing, but I think respect and communication were probably the two things. So it was related to, I suppose, like you, older generations, you have to always speak respectfully and you don't tend to disagree if somebody
Yeah,
older is telling you something.
absolutely.
Because they know best because they have the experience. And again, when I moved into different roles and I was quite young, I suppose, when I was appointed as CMO, and then going into some of the meetings with investors who are, older men, and I had to tell them that they were wrong, number one,
Yeah.
but obviously always in a very respectful way. It was a little bit difficult at first, but then you kind of get over it when you know you're doing things for the right reason. But yeah, it was definitely that. And I think at first it held me back slightly, but I then started to realize my own context.
Yeah, your own context and your own worth. I think I saw a post by Barack Obama. He was doing a podcast with somebody where he was saying something along the lines of he became president and he started having these meetings with these senior leaders of various different countries. Sat in the rooms with them, and you soon realize that actually these people aren't the smartest in their countries, or aren't the some of them, in his opinion, shouldn't have even been leaders. They don't have the knowledge base, the compassion, the empathy, the understanding. But somehow people can end up in those senior roles. It doesn't mean that they are all
Yeah,
knowledgeable and have all of the answers. And so, yes, you soon learn that actually you may be older than me, but in this context and in this environment, the
exactly.
knowledge and the expertise that I am bringing supersedes your experiences. So, Soraya, your colleagues describe you as having endless positivity, but we all have tough days. Can you share a moment when you've had to dig deep to maintain your leadership presence, how you've got through it? I've always tried to maintain a positive outlook for my staff, but there are tough days, right? There are days where you just don't feel like it, things aren't going quite right at home, or whatever it may be. How do you still remain positive?
I've had many of those days. Like many people, I think what always stands out in my career, and probably will be the same for most in the workplace and actually personally, was with COVID and when it first hit and we were all faced with such uncertainty and everyone was impacted. You know, we were impacted in business massively, but we were all impacted personally in different ways. And I was really trying to hold the team's morale, but there was so much pressure from our investors, from the business, for us being able to do the right thing for our students living in our buildings. And then we had to put, you know, our brilliant team members on furlough and following that, making some of them redundant. And it was so hard. I mean, it was like tears and it was difficult. But I suppose what got me through it was remembering that for me, leadership isn't about always being certain. It's about being human. Like, we're all human. And if you can just be open and honest and address fears and admit that you have your own fears and show up consistently for people, I think I just did the best I could in the situation. And I think that was enough for people because I was just so open and honest with everything that was happening. And that's kind of been my motto throughout, even with my team, that if anything, if there's bad news, I will always just say it and be honest because if people know what's going to come, or at least they've got as much communication as I have, then they feel better equipped to deal with what might come next. So yeah, I think that's it. It's just being open, honest, and remembering we're all human, regardless of what position we're in.
I couldn't agree more, and so well said. I am struggling here to stop, not tap my feet and start clap. I'm like clapping. I'm like, this is brilliant. Like this is, and I say that because there are just so many things there that you have said that have resonated with me. I know when I will never forget when COVID broke. I can remember I hadn't heard of the word furlough before, and
Yeah, me too.
all of a sudden I'm hearing this word furlough in meetings. I'm Googling what the hell does furlough mean? Um, and because at that moment in time, one of my roles was overseeing student accommodation at Coventry University. I can remember our, you know, their frontline staff. So our cleaners and our housing officers still had to come into work. Many of our cleaning staff were of an older generation and had various different illnesses that or were susceptible more susceptible to COVID, and trying to watch the guidance that was coming out and then decide which of those cleaners you're going to tell to come to work and which aren't. When myself, I was fearful, like genuinely
Yeah.
fearful. I was like, what the hell is going on? And I can remember at one stage, I was like, so I'm being asked to vote on who I'm going to risk, whose lives I'm going to risk in coming to work. And that just didn't sit well with me. But you're absolutely right. We ended up going down the human route, which was, this is all the government guidance. We haven't got a clue. We still have to provide a service. If you are willing to come to work, put your hand up type of thing.
Yeah.
And if you are very nervous and don't want to, equally just let us know and we will figure things out. And obviously you then run a service on what you've got as opposed to, well, you know, you have to come to work and you have to come to work because this is the guidelines. It was a very volatile and scary moment for many, including leaders too.
Yeah, exactly.
So just moving on from that then, as someone who has been described as an integral to launching brands in new cities because you've done it all. Just remind me, how many cities is Nido operating in?
So currently we're in Spain and Portugal. I think Nido's been on a bit of a journey where we expand and then we kind of exit assets. So right now we're on a bit of a growth journey. So we are in Spain and Portugal, and then we are looking to grow into Italy and Germany. So right now we're across kind of 5 cities.
Just roughly how many students do you have on an annual basis?
Right now we have 3,000, but we have just acquired a new big portfolio in Iberia. So very soon we're going to have 13,000.
Oh wow, that's a huge jump.
It's a huge jump. But I mean, across my time at Nido, been at points where we've been managing a similar amount anyway.
Okay, so it's not new ground to you. You have the
No,
infrastructure and the know-how.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so having been through those experiences before where you're launching in new cities, in new countries, how do you build trust and momentum within those teams when you're in uncharted territories?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always about starting with listening and learning before making any assumptions or declarations or changes. I think a lot of people think that you could just, I don't know, take what you've done in the UK and plonk it into Spain and maybe it will work and you just do a few tweaks. It's never going to work. So you need to genuinely be curious about what is happening, why it happens, and then learn the local context, the culture. You need to respect existing strengths, even though you might not understand why things are done the way they are. If they've been working, then show respect for it. And I think the biggest thing is making sure you're co-creating with a team rather than top down. You need to do this, this, and this. If you're doing it together as a team, then momentum builds when people feel heard and included. That's the way you drive great strategies and great implementation. And then I suppose the other big part of it for me, which I've mentioned before, it's all about really clear communication. Uncertainty arises from the unknown. So the clearer you can be on the strategy, any changes, and the why, it's easier to bring people on the journey with you.
But I'm going to ask an ignorant question here. You mentioned just because it works here doesn't mean it's going to work in Spain. It's the same product. Why not? And have you
Goes
got any examples of where?
Yeah, it all goes back to culture, language, tone, nuance, which we discussed before. So even things like messages and taglines, which work in the UK, because in the UK we like a little bit of sarcasm or a play on words. If you tried that in Spain, it just wouldn't work because students in Spain are looking for a little bit more of a aspirational message compared to the UK, who just want a little bit more straight up. But it comes down to things like, let's look at tour experience, for example. In the UK, students are very comfortable to do tours by themselves. They don't need to bring their parents. Some of them are happy to do everything online. They don't necessarily want to talk to anybody. They can figure out all the information, do their research, do the booking. If they do have a tour, 20, 30 minutes, done. Spain. A tour, I've been there when tours have been attended by parents, grandparents, and maybe an auntie.
Right.
And then the tour will take 2 hours because they will ask so many questions. And then that's just the beginning because then they will call maybe a few days later and then there'll be another hour on the phone to clarify. And then maybe they will call to be talked through the booking process. I'm exaggerating a little to make the point because
Sure.
now it's getting a little bit quicker, but that's kind of a huge difference we see. And obviously, if you think about how that impacts other aspects of your operations, if somebody is taking that much time to do a tour, then they obviously can't do other things that they're
Yeah.
supposed to. So yeah, it's just a lot more focus on people and talking and time and, having a well-rounded information set to make decisions. Whereas in the UK, you can kind of do your analysis and do the decision making quite independently.
I find that so interesting, and I think me 15 years ago would have been absolutely the ignorant person that would have gone into a country and said, well, this works in the UK and therefore we're going to do it like this. And I would have failed miserably. And I mean, I've got examples of where I have failed in my career. You seem very polished. I feel like failure has never crossed your desk. Have you ever been I mean, have you got any failures that have taught you something, or has it been pretty plain sailing for you?
I don't think it's been pretty plain sailing. I think probably one of the hardest things for me is I'm definitely earlier on in my career compared to now. I'm a yes person. So I just take things on and then I think that I should be able to do everything. So then I don't ask for support because before I would have thought that that would be a sign of failure. And I thought that saying yes to everything was a strength. But I did burn out because of that. There's a point that you reach where then you don't enjoy what you do and you don't have the passion. And that's a place where nobody should reach. So I suppose what that taught me was that I need to, first of all, recognize the signs of that in myself, but also I need to delegate, I need to prioritize. And by delegating, and once I had teams, I needed to create the space for them to step up. I mean, that's how people and teams develop, right? So I suppose now my ethos is more about setting boundaries and trying to stop always firefighting and pushing to the limits. So it's about knowing how much you can do and how much you can do effectively, because, working crazy hours, if they're not effective, then you're not producing effective work either.
We can all be busy fools, right?
Exactly that. So it's recognizing that, I don't know, I'm more focused and productive in mornings, and by late afternoon I don't do any work which is strategic because my brain is just not there.
Yeah.
So I think recognizing those things and letting your team recognize those things as well. Like, I'm so flexible to that. If they know their strengths and when they can put in those core hours, then brilliant. Like, that works for me.
Did you manage to make this change overnight, or was this a gradual thing? I know for people, for myself, letting go was something that it took me. I couldn't tell you how long it took, but it was definitely closer to years than it was to days and months.
Yeah, it's been a process, and I suppose I've always been on a little bit of a journey of self-awareness and learning, especially as I've gotten older. But it was also knowing that I was surrounded by a brilliant team and knowing that they were totally capable. And then once you start doing it and you start seeing not only the results, and you will, I mean, I still have those bits where like, well, I would have done it slightly
Yeah.
differently, but actually the result is going to be fine. So, and then once you start seeing those people develop, because you're giving them that kind of authority and ownership, I mean, that's what it's all about for me, seeing people develop. So ultimately it's almost benefited me in many ways.
Yeah. I know that's brilliant. I'm going to circle back to winning Woman of the Year for PBSA in 2023. How did that come about?
That's a good question. Suppose I've always wanted to champion others. That's kind of been my ethos, mainly due to, I suppose, some of the challenges I had been faced with throughout my career, especially in property, and which is mainly male dominated. And I've also been many times the only woman in the room, the only woman of color in the room. And it taught me that I need to advocate for others. And if I am, or I have something in me that is a little bit fearless, then I should be the voice for people that might not have the voice. And I should be the face for people that might not have someone else that looks like them in those positions. So I suppose I started to work a little bit on that, but also just to make small changes within Nido and the business and for our residents. And I suppose that was recognized. So
Which is
very
fantastic.
grateful.
It really is. It's a fantastic achievement. And just hearing you share some of your thoughts on I guess it's your style of leadership and who you are. I love that you champion others and you're prepared to put yourself out to raise awareness. That takes a brave individual to do that.
Yeah, brave. And maybe it's spurred me more. I mean, I have two daughters now, and I just don't want them to face the same challenges that I faced. So if I can make a small change now for people who are working, but also for them, for when they're ready to enter the workplace or actually even in their daily lives, then it's all going to be worthwhile.
You're here to that. So it leads me to my next question then. What barriers have you had to navigate, specifically as a woman in the property and marketing arena? And what advice would you give to other women who are looking for C-suite roles or aspiring C-suite roles?
I suppose I've faced quite a few, and some of them are a little bit, they're not so obvious, but you can catch the tone or the undertone of things. So I've definitely been underestimated. I have been interrupted. I'm mistaken for someone more junior more times than I can count. I suppose what it's taught me that I need to own my space. I need to keep speaking up. And I deserve a place on the table as much as everyone else. And although at many times I felt like I haven't fit in, the issue isn't me, it's the society and the workplaces and the sectors that we work in. They're not reflective of what society currently is. So I think it took me a while to kind of get there. But once I understood that and that I was adding value. And actually, I am an expert in what I do, and I have as much of a voice as many of these other men around the table, actually. It kind of gave me the confidence to just speak up and own my place at the table, whereas maybe before I was a little bit more of a, oh, should I sit here? And now I purposefully do that. When I go to a conference, I will go and sit in the front.
Yeah, brilliant.
And you see all the women sit at the back. And I'm like, why are you guys sitting at the back? This is exactly the problem.
Mhm.
Like, even things are in boardrooms and things, the women will tend to sit further away or towards the out. We all need to be very aware of it so we start to make those changes.
No, that's a brilliant insight. And, often I will, some of the things you have said there, I'm hearing for the first time, and I've never given consideration to it, that women will tend to sit at the back of a conference rather than at the front. Women, stop doing it. People of color, stop doing it. Listen to this woman right now, because I think for me, it took me a while to understand my worth. It just took me a while to get there. And when I understood my worth, that kind of made my path a lot easier internally in my head, where I had more. I've always been a confident person, but I just didn't think I was worthy of sitting at some of these tables. Your contribution is required. You are in the role because the the company believe you have the capability of moving the company in the right direction at an accelerated pace. So for those people who are out there who struggle with imposter syndrome, you've got to understand that you are worthy, and nobody has all of the answers. That's the other myth as well, from where sometimes
Exactly.
when you sit in these rooms, you think everybody else knows everything, and it's just, well, my experience is it's just not the case. I don't know what yours is.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I think, I mean, a piece of advice, I suppose, to aspiring women leaders is that you don't have to shrink yourself to lead, nor do you have to lead like a man.
Yeah.
You need to embrace the amazing leadership qualities that come with being female. Like your perspective and context is your power. And I just wish more women would see that and understand it, because it's really difficult in the world where you see males getting ahead because of how they behave. You think that's what you have to emulate. It's not the case. Embrace your superpower, which is bringing those female qualities to the table.
It's that, and being yourself.
Exactly.
You are good enough. Whoever you is, I'm pointing at the camera right now, you are good enough. So whoever your authentic self is, that is good enough to lead. Don't think you have to morph into something else that you've seen on TV shows or past leaders that you have. Past leaders will shape you, but lead in your own style, because faking it as a leader, you will get found out. For sure, you'll get found out. Suraiya, so you've been in the student game now for a while, right? You've gone a couple of decades now, so you've seen things shift. The student accommodation sector has evolved dramatically. How do you stay ahead of trends, while building authentic connections with a generation that is very different to the one you and I grew up in?
100%. I feel older every day, but it also keeps me young because
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
to
yeah,
keep up with
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I suppose one of the most important things is that we keep talking to the students and listening to feedback, and it gives us so many insights. That open conversation really shapes what we do and allows us to improve all the time. We also invest in research, particularly before entering new markets, and that's just so we can understand as much as possible from as many stakeholders as possible. And we also speak to parents because they're key decision makers in many markets that we're into. And, reading, attending conferences, looking at new platforms, the standard. But I suppose more than that for me is I surround myself with a brilliant team, many of who are younger than me, but I've also purposefully chosen a team that challenge me and challenge my thinking. They teach me, and I love that. Um, I don't know it all, and I need to keep learning. And I will never be able to post on TikTok how they post on TikTok. I've
Look,
accepted it.
if I can just interject here, right? So my son, who is 13 years old, and obviously it's the summer holidays at the moment, I've said, Jacob, he said, Dad, you haven't got a TikTok site. And I was like, yeah, because I haven't got a clue. He said, I'll do something for you. And he's just started doing the stuff, and it's just blowing my mind. And I know this makes me sound old, and my kids already tell me, oh, Dad, you're an uncle now, you're an uncle. That means something in child world. But I think when it comes to employing people, And you touched on it there, right? You don't have all of the answers. There are so many things in this digital world that have moved so quickly that I don't quite get, but the younger workforce generation, they do get. And you just have to trust them, and though you may not get it, and you're like, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. It's a different generation, right? And that's how you can continue to learn and stay ahead of the game.
Exactly. And it's all about trust because
Mm.
there are many things I really do not get.
Yeah, yeah. High five.
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, but do you guys like that? And they're like, yeah, it's great. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. And then you go and see, and it works. And you're like, okay,
Yeah, and it gets brilliant
okay.
engagement. So I think that's it. It's being able to trust and, like we said before, delegate to your team and acknowledge that again, the reason you've hired them is for the skills and expertise that they bring. And that's what makes great teams when people have those different skills and expertise and you all come together.
Yeah, you've touched on it there where you look at continuous learning. You're a chartered marketer. How do you balance how much learning time and personal development time you put in alongside having to do the job?
Yeah, it's much harder when you have two young children as well to balance with work. I do try and block time for learning. So every morning I block at least 30 minutes. So that's for reading.
Mm,
Usually that's for reading. And then I always have a podcast going whilst I'm doing something,
sure.
chores, driving, whatever. But honestly, like you said before, there's just so much right now. We have so much access to information. It can be a little overwhelming, actually, and it's easy to feel like you're being a bit left behind if you don't keep up with
Mm,
so many topics and things that are there. So, what I try to do, because I know there's not enough hours of the day for everything that I'm interested in, is just try and prioritize what will make the most impact. And then I split that. So obviously what will work for the business and the team. And then actually you need to learn about things that motivate and stimulate you personally and add to your own professional development. So I try and pick the key things which help me with those. And then I love sharing what I'm learning with the team. So I'm always sharing like articles and videos. And that way, I suppose we can all grow together.
yeah. Oh no, fantastic and well said. I think the way in which we learn now, well, the way in which I learn now has moved in that. So you talked about podcasts, right? I don't think there are many gym sessions, and I go to the gym very regularly, where I haven't got a podcast on. And you're absolutely right. I like to learn about things that are of interest to me. I have tried to learn things that I'm not interested in, where I'm like, I just need to understand more. And I just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for me. So it's following those passions, equally knowing what your goals and what you want to achieve is in the distant, and therefore building blocks that associate to that. I love your concept around having reading time. I've never done that. I've never considered that, rightly or wrongly. And I wonder what your thoughts are on this. In fact, it's wrongly. I've just answered my own question, but I have always seen work time as work time, and any learning I have to do outside of work time because I can't learn in work time because I've got so many things to do. And I think that's a bad, upon reflection, that is a bad thought process. Have you always had this reading time scheduled in?
No, I have not.
Okay.
And I think I did share the same outlook as you until there was a moment where, people are, did you read that industry article? Did you see what that competitor's doing? Did you? And it's like, well, wait, when do I have the time to do
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
And then I was like, actually, and obviously since I have been doing a lot more PR and communications, I need to have that morning slot so I can just catch up on industry news and what's going on.
100%.
And I've
Yeah.
told my team to do the same. Like
Absolutely.
that's the only way we can then keep not even a competitive edge, just keep aware
Yeah.
because there's so much information out these days. So yeah, it's been more of a recent thing than before, but I wish I had done that before. And I'm actually mentoring someone now, and she was asking me like, "Oh, I don't know how to balance everything and I have so much I want to learn." And I literally told her, "You need to block out time in
Yeah.
your day to do it." And it was the same response still, which was what you said. Oh, but I don't know if it's working. I was like, but it is working because you are developing yourself to be a better person at work with, more knowledge.
Without a
and the
shadow of a doubt,
skills.
it comes back to the point you made earlier, right? We can all be busy fools, but if you're educating yourself, you're becoming more efficient and more knowledgeable and more
Exactly.
of an expert, which is only going to lead to better decision making in the future. I've always known, leadership and development and personal development is really important, but wrongly I've put that in a box, which is, and therefore you have to do that in your own time. No, if you're working for an organization whose goals and values you're trying to achieve, they will support you. Most companies will support you in having the time. I know I can't think of any of my bosses that would have said you can't have half an hour reading time or personal development time.
Exactly.
Final
Exactly.
question from me. This has been really good. It's been better than I thought it would be,
Thanks.
which I love because you've just given us so many nuggets that I believe people are going to listen to and think, I'm going to introduce that, or I never thought of that. If you could go back in time and give advice to your younger self, Suraiya, who's just coming into the work environment, with all the knowledge that you have gained now, is there anything you would say to her that you believe would make her path easier?
Yes, probably a couple of things. Trust your instincts, and you don't need to have it all figured out, but also don't underestimate yourself and don't shrink to make others comfortable. Speak out. And I suppose you'll realize that being different was the superpower all along. I wish I had known that
Yeah.
much earlier.
Yeah, but you know it now, and
I know
therefore
it now.
I look forward to following your career for the next 10 years because you're certainly somebody who is making the right impact in the right way. There have been a couple of times where I'm like, I would work for her. If she has got
Oh,
any
thank you.
jobs,
I
I would
appreciate that.
genuinely. I mean, marketing is my weakest point, so
It's
I
all about attitude,
it's
Obi,
all
for
about
me.
attitude, and a lot of skills are teachable as well, right? But
Exactly.
no, I think you're doing a commendable job in at Nido. How many years in now have you been there?
7 years now.
7 years. And if people are interested in Nido, either as for a student accommodation purposes, if you're a university and you want to get in contact with yourselves, or if you're an individual who wants to come and work with your organization, how do they go about doing that? Where would you send them to?
You can go to our website or just contact me. I'm always happy to speak to people.
Brilliant. With that said, Suraiya, thank you for your time. It's been absolutely awesome, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
And so be, it's been a pleasure.
Take care.
Bye.